with its net zero goals and everything else, has Europe gotten on board the U.S. train? Have they gotten, found the truth of we need terminals to import the gas as well, because we can build them in the United States, but if the ship is just out at sea, it doesn't end well.
It does take huge infrastructure to export natural gas. And as you said, Brian, on the export terminal and on the regas and import terminal. Europe had gotten to a place where about 50% of all its natural gas imports came from Russia, and they dominantly came from by pipeline. So they had LNG export capacity. The U.S. has been shipping gas to Europe for 10 years. But with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and really this rocking of all of us, that it's not just economic security, it's national security, having a reasonable energy policy with diversity and dealing with your allies more than your adversaries. But there was a rapid ramp up of U.S. U.S. was the biggest supplier to fill the hole as Russian import of natural gas has declined. As you said, Italy went from one import terminal to 3. Germany built 3 or 4 terminals very rapidly. But
or at least the ships, the regas ships. Germany acted very quickly. I was on one of them. I was out in Germany. We were doing this. Italy, I think they have 2 ports and they have 1 regas ship to receive these terminals. But there's still a lot more import demand, I think. Like, there's still a lot more to be built. Or talk to us about the infrastructure in Europe that still needs to be built to receive more American gas.
There's a shortage of natural gas storage in Europe as well, which makes it tough because demand, at least for home heating, is seasonal. Manufacturing demand, producing fertilizer and petrochemicals is not so seasonal, but home heating is very seasonal. Depends how cold the winter was, how warm the summer is. But yes, infrastructure needs to be built. And Brian, that brings us to one of the challenges with Europe and that partnership with the U.S., like our longest and oldest allies. The United States is essentially an offspring of the European continent, so very close, tight relationships there. But about the financial crisis, we had a massive pivot in energy trajectory between the United States and Europe. The United States went on to the shale revolution. We grew our energy production massively. We more than doubled our natural gas production. We tripled our oil production. And we've driven down the real cost of energy quite meaningfully in the United States. Europe, I think, really embraced the climate agenda and a march towards net zero.
Is that wrong?
I think it is.
Why? I mean, we all want a better climate. We want to have clean air, clean water, right? So
Absolutely.
how do we make sure we have power, but also accomplish the goals that I think we all hear from Colorado? Beautiful mountains, clean air. You want that too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was a board member of an environmental group until I had to resign that position as well to accept my new job. And when I grew up in Colorado, when I was a kid, we couldn't see the mountains 1 out of 3 days, the brown cloud in Colorado. Since then, the population's tripled, per capita income's doubled, the economy's gotten massively bigger, greenhouse gas emissions have gone up, but pollutants and air quality have gotten dramatically better. One of the great achievements of the modern world is a massive growth in wealth with cleaner air, cleaner water, the return. When I was a kid, I'm a mountaineer and a climber. I never saw moose, I never saw elk, I didn't see bear, I didn't see mountain lions. You'll see all of them in the Colorado mountains today. So the idea of wealth and smart pollution control technologies, you can have economic growth in a better environment. Greenhouse gases are trickier because we simply don't have meaningful replacements for hydrocarbons. The world has spent $4 to $5 trillion over the last 20 years, and mostly in wind, solar, and batteries, and combined, they haven't quite hit 3% of global energy. In the United States, they've hit 3%. In the total global energy, they're about 2.7% of global energy. More money is spent every year on wind, solar, and batteries than oil, gas, and coal. So where the money is going, we've had a transition of funding for energy, but not a transition of where energy comes from.
But I spoke with Secretary Burgum yesterday, your friend and colleague in the White House, and I said, don't we need all of everything? This is Gastech. I get it. The focus is on gas, and we'll talk about fertilizer. I used to be a fertilizer trader before I got into TV, some people now still say I'm a fertilizer trader of a different kind, but I won't joke about that. So I get the importance of that in the global food supply. But quickly talk to us about, don't we need it all? Don't we need all nuclear, wind, solar? Not so much whales anymore, but you know what I mean? We're gonna need it all because power demand, AI, we all want air conditioning. Everybody in the world, right? You think Dubai would be Dubai without air conditioning? Would Singapore be Singapore without air conditioning? No way, right? We've all been to, maybe many of you live in those places. They're super hot. The demand for power is just doing this. How do we meet all of our power goals with all of our climate goals?
Love that framing, Brian. Like 1 billion people live lives remotely recognizable to all of us in the room. 7 billion people want to live like we live. We consume about 5 times more energy per capita than the other 7 billion. So yeah, is there a need for more energy on the planet? Absolutely. The biggest driver of human progress has been the survival of modern energy, and we need lots more. Again, the growth of energy, it's actually relative. If you look at it in decadal timescales, 1.6% compound annual growth rate the last 50 years, 1.7% if you look just the last 15 years. So when I hear these projections of demand for energy is about to peak and decline, which is what you have to assume if you're going to imagine a net zero scenario, I don't know what that says to the other 7 billion people. But
they just want what we have. They want the lights to work, they want the heat to work, and they don't want to live in a small house with fumes from making their own fire and cutting firewood and their kids having asthma. They want to have clean air. And we're kind of arrogant about that sometimes, I think. The West.
We don't even realize that. 2 billion people, as you're just saying, cook their daily meals and heat their homes burning wood. 2 to 3 million easily preventable deaths every year from that lack of clean cooking fuel, burning wood. So yes, we want more energy. And I went to college originally to work on nuclear energy. I went to solar energy in graduate school, geothermal for years, including again recently. So yes, I want all energy that's affordable, reliable, and secure. But that doesn't mean all energy. If you're going to invest, take again the example of Europe. Again, my friends and our allies. So my hope is an energy pivot and a re-embracement of abundance, economic growth, and security across the continent. But Europe embraced at a larger scale investments in wind, solar, and batteries, and more prohibitions against hydrocarbon development in this attempt to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions.
Is that pivoting back though? Because we've seen political winds shift. Everybody in this room is from a different country, so you don't want to generalize. Probably have some Americans in here. Political winds, they do this, and they may do that again in 3 years in America. We don't know. Where is Europe right now? Because they went hard one way. Now I feel like they're not going hard the other way, but they're definitely turning.
I believe so, and I hope so. And
aren't you meeting with them maybe tomorrow?
We'll be in Brussels tomorrow. And that is our goal. We want a thriving economy, but Brian, unfortunately what has happened is Europe's sort of restrictive energy policies. It's the only place in the world that's actually had meaningful decline in energy consumption across the continent. And this is industry leaving Europe.
Well, some people might say that's good. Using less energy is a good thing.
If you get the exact same thing out of the end. But most of the reduction in energy consumption in Europe has been industry leaving, so closing down a modern natural gas powered factory in Germany or Italy or the United Kingdom. Those same products are now made in a coal factory in Asia, loaded on a diesel powered ship to come back. So I don't call that green or climate policy. The other driver of reduced consumption is if you make energy or anything more expensive and less reliable, guess what? People will buy less of it. To use the German example, they had a little over 100 gigawatts of electric generating capacity. Now they have 240 gigawatts of electric generating capacity, $500 billion invested. They produce 20% less electricity out of this massively more complicated grid. That's a tripling of electricity prices. This is, and is it decarbonizing the world? And of course the answer is no. It's just moving where emissions are and reducing consumption by affordability reasons. This is the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution. So, to come back to decarbonization, that is happening gradually with time. 200 years ago, we got almost all our energy from burning wood, and coal arrived. Coal is lower carbon intensity than wood. Then we moved to oil, then natural gas, then nuclear. We are in a natural decarbonization per unit.
We're nuclear now. We're shutting everything down. In Germany and in the United States. And now in the United States, there's this rush to reopen the nuclear plants that have shut down. We're going to run on the board of a nuclear company.
We're going to
Which
reopen.
also had to resign when you took this job.
We're going to reopen a large nuclear power plant that was closed 3 years ago in Michigan. It'll be the first reopening.
Oh, Palisades, right?
Palisades power plant in Michigan. And we're going to stop. The United States, of course, has done some of these I would call energy foolish things as well, in that we've closed a whole bunch of firm power capacity. When I arrived as Energy Secretary, the plans over the next 5 years were to close 100 gigawatts of firm electric generating capacity, mostly coal plants, but also natural gas plants. And then there was a plan to build 22 gigawatts of new. Close 100, add 22. Is that a road to win the AI race? No chance. So we are stopping the closure of coal plants, except if they really are old and uneconomic. There are some plants that have aged out, but there's a whole bunch of other plants that were slated for closure just because it was politically fashionable to say we're not using coal anymore. We need to keep those plants alive. We need to add as much additional capacity as we can so that we can lead in AI. And we want our friends and allies in Europe and in Asia and elsewhere to also grow their electric generating capacity to also drive progress in AI in their society.
And we've talked so much about electricity generation, as we should. Like I said, in a former life, many years ago, I traded chemical commodities for Mitsubishi Bank in New York. I was young and dumb. I didn't realize that, I thought most fertilizer was made by nature, made by horses, cattle, not by chemicals. Phosphates, nitrates, diammonium phosphates, triple phosphates. And I also didn't realize how much natural gas goes into that production. And that is why when Russia invaded Ukraine, the price of fertilizer soared. Stocks, CNBC, we're looking at the big fertilizer producers in the US and Europe, their stocks soared. Natural gas is not just for lighting and heating. It's to protect the world's food supply, I think.
If you took away just one use of natural gas, via the Haber-Bosch process, two just awesome German chemists, maybe one of the most important inventions in the history of the world, which is to take methane gas and combust it. Natural gas is both the feedstock and the energy source to make a fixable form of nitrogen in the form of ammonia. Like, this just changed the world over 100 years ago. If you just stop natural gas use for just that one thing, global food production would decline by 50%. You can still have refrigeration and motorized mechanized transport and all the other things that hydrocarbons do to increase food production. But if you stop nitrogen fertilizer production, you plummet food production. We have an example of that. In Sri Lanka, they had a government come in that wanted to be greener than everybody else, and they banned synthetic fertilizers. That was a politically popular position. Within 6 months, grain production was declining, food prices spiked, and the government had to flee the country. So there's just a lot of naivete, and it's around the world. It's mostly in the rich world. It's not, of course, globally. But in the rich world, we've just promoted an unrealistic view of climate change. I've been speaking and talking about climate change for 20 years. It's a real thing. We've increased atmospheric concentration of CO2 by 50%. It absorbs infrared radiation and leads to a warming influence on the planet. 100% true. We released about a month ago a 140-page report on climate change at the Department of Energy. If you Google DOE climate report, it'll pop up. Highly recommend you read it. It's just an overview about what do we know. It's about historical data, the physics and the chemistry of it. We don't know the future, so there's no predictions about where the world's going, but we should start with what do we know. And it turns out climate change is a real thing, but it's exaggerated so much to scare children and drive political policy making that we need to have a reasonable understanding about it. There's two problems. One is, as I've said, it's very hard to transform the global energy mix. Same percent of energy from hydrocarbons today as 50 years ago. Think of all the money and mandates and policies and everything that's been done to do that. Very hard to change that trajectory. So we don't have an answer. But the other flip side is that it turns out climate change is real, but it's relatively slow moving. We haven't had an increase in the frequency or intensity of hurricanes, tornadoes, droughts, floods. This is in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change data. It's all there to be seen, but it gets magnified by politicians and media into it.
Hey, don't bring the media into it.
Oh, they're very guilty in this.
No, listen, we can do the whole panel on that.
Yes.
But this is Gastech. I'm not sure that would be the greatest panel in the world, but listen, we can debate, discuss that all day long. I want to get back to the topic at hand though, because that is, unfortunately, that discussion becomes so politicized. Would you agree? You don't have to come out of the media, but it's become so politicized that either side is just digging in. Nobody wants to give an inch, and nobody gets anywhere. The conversation doesn't advance. You're a smart guy. Berkeley, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, grew up in Colorado, Haber-Bosch effect. I mean, we could argue that those are liberal qualifications. Mr. Secretary.
One of our goals in this administration, I think we've had some success so far, is to take the politics out of energy and out of climate change.
Nobody can do that.
Well, people are going to have different perspectives, but I can't tell you how many Democratic senators, Democratic governors, Democratic reps I've talked to that have said, oh, it's a breath of fresh air. And everybody wants to win at AI. Everybody wants to do that. AI is a huge helpful for bringing back what I call energy sobriety or energy common sense. If you want to reindustrialize your country, if you want to move artificial intelligence forward where you live, you've got to grow your ability to produce energy, and you've got to keep it affordable. Everybody wants that.
The numbers around AI are mind-blowing. I mean, we have a stock in America, a company called Oracle. I'm sure everybody here has heard of it. Stock's up, I think, like 25% this morning in New York. Larry Ellison's like the third richest man in the world. He's going to be probably the second after today's over. He'll have a bigger yacht. But so much that stock moves on AI, cloud infrastructure. When we look at the demands for artificial intelligence, US, Europe, Asia, and around the world, the numbers are almost Carl Sagan-like, billions and billions and billions, maybe trillions. Is there anything that you look at, Mr. Secretary, that is wrong, or these numbers, do you think they're right? Because if they're right, we've got some work.
The numbers are staggering, but they're staggering. This is an awesome thing. What is AI going to do? It's not only going to make our businesses more efficient and give us greater services for us as individuals, it's going to massively advance the progress of science. I truly believe in 10 years from now, almost all cancers will be just manageable conditions. We're going to map down to the protein level of what happens in tumors and how to address that. Fusion energy. I went to MIT to work on fusion energy 40 years ago. We've made slow, steady progress for 40 years. That final control we need to make fusion happen, AI is going to enable that in the next 1, 2, 3 years. So there's just awesome upside to it. It's just going to make all humans more productive. Of course, it'll be misused, and there's that. Any new powerful tool has negatives and has positives. But we can rise to that challenge. We have massive energy resources in the world. But I'll tell you one thing we did. The national lab, we have 17 national laboratories in the United States. They're all under the Department of Energy. They have a lot of land.